Hello, hello, hello. My name is Brad Laporte. I'm Chief Marketing Officer at Morphisec, and I'm joined here today with Joe Simone. Joe, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Brad.
So today we're going to talk about a very important topic about exposure management and how you can use that to basically get ahead of the game and be more predictive in terms of and preventative in terms of combating things like ransomware and more advanced attacks. And really diving into some of the things that are near and dear to my heart. So, uh, exposure management really has kind of a real connection to me and some of the work that I did back at Gartner, going back as far as 2019, and starting to see in this space and seeing this shift from detection response towards a more preemptive type aspect and being able to see things ahead of time, being able to reduce those exposures, reduce the overall attack surface. And, you know, with the evolution of ransomware, how that's becoming an epidemic, it's a very growing, you know, threat to businesses. It's very relentless and sophisticated in terms of targeting endpoints. And now AI tools are are creating their own autonomous ransomware. And that's being seen out in the news today. We're seeing more and more AI-driven ransomware and more surgical precision. These automated tools are enabling attackers to infiltrate environments faster than ever. They're able to detonate ransomware more in a more sophisticated manner. So it's evolving every day, every minute of every day, and the reaction side of the house, security is failing. So on top of all this, organizations are facing a significant internal challenge. They don't have the budgets to keep up. They're overwhelmed. Alert fatigue is a serious thing, and they're being stretched too thin by those constraints and by those elements and being able to do that. And on the defense side of the house, AI adoption, it's still in its infancy. McKinsey just had a report that just came out that 95% of all AI pilot programs failed to deliver the return on investment that they sought after to implement. Now we're seeing things like legacy tools, and now with the end of life of Windows 10, and organizations trying to keep up with the business of the speed of now, and being able to implement that. Now, with that, endpoint vulnerabilities are remaining incredibly unprotected um, across the board. And now with AI, threat actors are able to exploit those vulnerabilities at scale. And this is really driving forward a really high cost of ransomware and really advanced level attacks on businesses worldwide. So where continuous threat exposure management comes in is it's being able to really address and have visibility into areas that you might not have had access to before. So what is going on in your attack surface and identifying that scope, being able to just have that discovery and have that prioritization and being able to assess across all of those and then actually take action. So being able to validate and then mobilize through technology and through personnel to be able to mitigate those issues. And by the end of the year, Gartner predicts that organizations implementing CTEM reduce data breaches by over two-thirds, which is a very big deal. It's a very significant aspect. So, that's what we can really expect over or really over the next 12 to 18 months as this framework continues to evolve. And how we've kind of added our own point of view is we have uh, our module called Adaptive Exposure Management. And here we're looking into vulnerability prioritization. What vulnerabilities or CVEs provide comprehensive insights into known risks? Insights into the mitigation of that. Prioritizing, well beyond the basics that you're getting from your Intel feeds and your vulnerability management feeds, and identifying vulnerable running applications that might pose immediate threats. And we'll dive into that today in a second. looking at high-risk software as well as your software inventory. So what high-risk software do you have on your servers or on your endpoints? And being able to look at those environments and have actual insights and being able to provide those recommendations that, instead of running around with your head chopped off, having an actual clear plan where you can go step by step by step. And then security misconfigurations. So continuing to audit your operations and auditing your CMDB and looking at security best practices and being able to look at non-managed endpoints that might be on your network or looking across your attack surface and reducing those exposure to those threats in a programmatic and automated fashion. And the other elements are security control validation. So tracking inventories of endpoint security controls, what's working in your environment and to what degree, and having the actual ability or tool set to have policy enforcement that you didn't have before, to have that continuous consistency check, and that being able to manage those controls and mitigating that deployment risk. So on the back end, Morphisec is constantly working continuously in deceiving attackers with really morphing the underlying attack surface, something like a ever-changing maze, to use an analogy. So we're constantly deterring, disrupting, and stopping threats throughout the whole life cycle in terms of uh, during, and post execution of attacks, especially ransomware. And with this, we have network infrastructure diversity, we have software application diversity. We're dynamically changing the system states on the back end. We're deploying decoys. We're obfuscating different attacks, and we're being able to have virtualization-based techniques along the full element. So think of it like we're deceiving and have these different deception techniques to make it harder and more difficult for attackers to basically identify that exposure. And as part of this, we've built out a comprehensive portfolio. Uh, we have exposure management, which is the outer ring, infiltration protection, we have impact protection, and adaptive recovery. And if I double click into that, for adaptive exposure management, we're looking at all those different elements that I talked about. We'll do a deeper dive on that today. But we also have infiltration protection, where we're looking at runtime memory protection, privileged execution, credential theft, hacking tool, and exfiltration protection. And then in the event that it gets past that second ring, we also have impact protection, where we have tamper, data encryption, and wiping protection that's protecting it and having that full defense and depth of that safety net, and ultimately fortifying your endpoints. And then last but not least, the inner ring, we have adaptive recovery, where we're conducting forensic recovery and data recovery to set it back to a clean state in the event that it gets to that inner ring. So we're looking at this, and we call this our anti-ransomware assurance suite. And we're looking at it across pre-execution, during execution, and post-execution. So we're monitoring the security gaps, we're detecting the vulnerabilities and misconfigurations, we're discovering privileged account manipulation, we're exposing the shadow networking services, and we're armoring those out-of-date applications. And then in execution, we're blocking the invasive ransomware, we're detecting, we're preventing, we're stopping privilege escalation, and we're preventing the tampering, blocking, and preventions of the encryption and destruction of data. And then on the tail end, we have post-execution. We're recovering the data files, we're being able to restore, and if needed, providing continuous improvement and recommendations on how to improve it for the future, as well as recovering any forensic evidence that might be needed for triage. So we have a full spectrum, a full suite in terms of looking at all this. So Joe, without further ado, I'd like to dive into the console and see what it's all about.
Awesome. Give me 1 second. Let me share my screen. All right. Can you see that okay? Maybe.
Here it is. Yep, all set.
Awesome. All right, great. So when it comes to adaptive exposure management, it's really about, like Brad was saying, identifying those kind of changes that you can make in your environment that are going to reduce risk and shrink that attack surface, ultimately reducing likelihood that an attacker is going to be able to get into your environment, exploit something, and establish persistence, maybe the stealing data or encrypting data, destroying data. None of those things that you actually want to happen. Um, and so there's really kind of a couple of key areas. First and foremost, making sure that the security controls are in place and active. So making sure that your security stack is actually running and operational. Understanding what applications are running within your environment or organization and what the risks those applications pose, not only from a vulnerability standpoint, but also from identifying whether or not they should even be running. Then looking at how host configurations and things like privileged server accounts might be used by an attacker and giving you that information that you can use to help reduce your exposure in those areas. And then finally, also giving you some visibility into the vulnerabilities and the actual likelihood that they might be exploited within your organization. So you can make kind of more informed, better decisions about what changes you want to make to kind of reduce risk. So kind of diving into those a little bit deeper. When we talk about security controls validation, right? This is all about making sure that the security stack is not only installed on your network or in your hosts, but that those tools are actually running. And because of how Morphisec works within Windows, we know about every application that's being started, including security tools. We also know when they're not running. And that's important because we've seen numerous examples of threat actors actually going in, they're disabling those security controls, disabling the EDRs by various methods, things like shutting down services or booting the machine into safe mode. And at the end of the day, we always want to make sure that those are actually running. We can also provide visibility into those security tools that are running on your network that may not be part of your security stack. Whether that's because they were maybe a missed machines during an uninstallation or a conversion, or maybe even a user thought they were being helpful and installed something that they read about. We actually had a customer that we were working with, and they had a a breach. The HR program they were using, SaaS application got breached. HR program or app company sent their users a um, an email saying that here's the breach monitoring, some breach monitoring coverage for their users. Attached to that was a uh, link to install McAfee. A bunch of users thought this came from IT, and they went in and actually installed McAfee into their environment. So they were actually able to use our tool. Nothing malicious there. Users just thought they were being helpful, but they were able to use our tool to go in and pick out those instances where the offending McAfee had been installed. But they thought they were being helpful, right? But sometimes that can be something that's going to introduce vulnerabilities into the environment that maybe weren't there before. And vulnerability management is a key part of any security program. And being able to prioritize the remediation of those vulnerabilities is a key component. So one of the things Morphisec does is it gives you not only the CVSS score and the CVEs associated with a particular application, but it also gives you this EPSS percentile or probability. And what this does is it gives you some perspective on how likely a particular application is to be targeted by an attacker. You can see here with the Microsoft Teams version that I have installed, it has a 94% probability that this is going to be used in a targeted attack. And now we partner with a third party that helps us provide some of this information. They look at things like key indicators, like is there an active exploit in the wild? Are threat actors targeting this application to really kind of help develop that probability score? So what this means is I'm going to be able to look at all the applications that I have installed and running in my environment and prioritize them accordingly, right? So I probably want to prioritize this Teams pretty high versus maybe not so much this VMware tools, which only has a 22% chance of being targeted, or maybe even this Google Chrome, which still has a 9.8 CVSS score, but there's less than a 1% chance that this is going to be used by attackers to target your organizations. So in this case, I want to prioritize repairing teams or patching teams, making decisions and helping to kind of speed up that process at the end of the day. But vulnerable applications, they're not the only applications that are in your environment that produce risk. And again, because of how we work with Windows, that gives us some unique perspectives into which applications are actually being used on hosts. So we do collect a full software inventory, and this gives us a very detailed view of not only the applications that are running, the hosts that they're running on, but also some additional information. So things like browser extensions. A lot of visibility, tools that I've looked at typically don't have the visibility into browser extensions on the desktops. So being able to see this information can be helpful. Again, we kind of had we're doing a console walkthrough with a customer, and they went into the browser extensions tab, and there was one user had installed three different VPN clients on three different machines. And this brought up a lot of questions, kind of set off the alarm bells, saying, why are there three different VPN browser extensions installed on three different machines? Is this an attacker trying to exfiltrate data, or is this user just trying to, kind of get around their security controls? Luckily, it turns out the user was just trying to get around security controls, but at the end of the day, gave them visibility that they didn't have before. So, other software that might be risky to your organization, um, software that is actually end of life and or um, end of service or support. Uh, these are likely never going to be updated or patched again. So if there's a serious vulnerability in these applications, this is going to give you some visibility uh, that you can look to either remove them or maybe wrap some compensating controls around to minimize the damage that can be done. Um, we're also looking at high risk software. So this is software that we typically will see threat actors using within kind of their techniques. And if look at IR reports, the attackers typically follow through a very specific, workflow. And it's very consistent across even multiple threat actor groups. One of the things they'll do is try to get in, they'll try to establish persistence, they'll try to establish some sort of remote connectivity. And a lot of times they'll do this using these, somewhat free tools like AnyDesk or Screen Connect or TeamViewer. And so if you see these in your organization and you're not actually using them, that might be an indicator that you probably have a problem and you want to try and remove them or start doing an incident to try and understand what exactly is going on. But we also look at things like Mega Upload. Attack threat actors love using Mega because Mega doesn't care what you put up there. So they'll use that as a endpoint to dump data to that they'll then use to ransomware or extort back to your organization. So being able to identify these applications that are very high risk can be very useful. So um, configurations, these are also really important to have visibility into. So Morphisec provides you visibility in those configurations that we see as risky, that we see threat actors leveraging. Things like administrative shares, shadow copies, WinRM remoting. These are all configurations that if they're present in your environment and you're not really utilizing them, disabling or limiting them on the hosts that they're present on can significantly reduce the risk and impact of an attack on your organization. But hosts are not the only thing that present risks. User accounts, particularly ones that have a lot of access rights or privileged server accounts, like the ones we have here, if they're compromised, they can have a very large impact on your organization. Being able to understand what that impact is and kind of what that blast radius is going to be if an account is compromised can help you minimize that risk if you do need to. So seeing that we have this administrator account on the SQL server, well, it's also got access to AnyDesk. It also has Apache, other applications that might be risky. Being able to understand those and kind of move on from them if we need to, again, wrap controls or reduce the the amount of access that they have to other systems and servers. So, and finally, our newest feature, Risk History. I was really pleased to log in this morning and see that it had been released. Risk History is basically a incident list for your organization's risk or exposure, giving you one place to kind of log in and look at those exposures. For anything that has not been remediated, you can actually go and click on the event, and it will take you to the relevant section and then help you build a filter automatically so you can get a little bit more information around what's going on with that. So it also gives you a place to see if anything has changed in your environment that might be affecting the risk score, right? This is a great addition, and I'm glad to see that it's finally being released. So, uh, again, it's all about reducing risk in your organization and making those small incremental changes in an iterative way that can significantly impact the attack surface and make sure your organization is as hardened as possible so you never have to get to the actual protection piece of what Morphisec is doing. So that wraps it up for me, Brad.
Well, yeah, amazing stuff. I appreciate you going through all that. So I see a couple questions have come in in the
Love
queue
questions.
here. Yeah, just give me a second here. So if anyone has any additional questions, we might not get to go through them all, but please drop it in the chat. So first one in the queue that I see here, now that I have time to go through them all. Joe, hopefully you can help out with this one. So how does Morphisec's adaptive exposure management differ from traditional vulnerability management
Ah,
tools?
that's a great question. So typically, I think the one thing is we're seeing every application one that gets launched on the desktop or on the host, right? We combine vulnerability prioritizations with that misconfiguration or configuration data detections, all that high risk software analysis, the security controls validation. Typically traditional tools are really kind of more focused around those, less real time than what we're providing. It's more point in time, especially if you're doing kind of the network scan based. But we also can give insights into things like shadow IT, again, those browser extensions, those VPN extensions, and then also those privileged server accounts. So being able to integrate that seamlessly with what we do from a protection standpoint really can help you reduce that attack surface before it becomes a problem. So great question.
Awesome. All right, next in the queue, are you compatible with CrowdStrike? And then there's another question here that says, are you compatible with Microsoft Defender? So let me compile those. So how does Morphisec ensure compatibility with existing security tools like EDR, XDR, etc.?
Look,
So what's that?
I say that's another great question. Yeah.
Yeah, another great one.
Say.
So, I could handle that one. That was pretty. I'm gonna take the low-hanging fruit here while I still can. Compliments. Yeah, we have integration with all of the EDR and XDR tools, as well as a lot of other systems. So if you have a unique requirement, I highly recommend just reaching out to us. So Microsoft Defender, CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, the list goes on. We have some of the most top integrations listed on our website you can check out. But our lightweight architecture, we're easy to plug and play with no performance impact. We're multi-tenant management, and it really simplifies deployment across all your environments. So it's easy to implement. So I don't know if you have anything to add there, but the short answer is yes, of course.
Yeah. I think you hit all the high points there, right? I think the big piece that I like to talk about is we also have a really great, robust API that if you have an existing security tool, we're going to be able to probably integrate with it. Really, with our API, you can do just about anything you can do in the console and pull any information out of the console that you can do with the console itself using just the API. So integration with
Mhm.
other security tools and the rest of your security stack is really high. And then also because of just how we work and how we work with Windows, we have a very high compatibility with all those other security tools as well. So
Awesome. Next, I have another one here. How does Morphisec mitigate ransomware across pre, during, and post-execution phases? So we talked a little bit about that at the beginning, and a little bit throughout, but I don't know if there's something you want to highlight there for each of the different phases. Joe?
Yeah, no, I think exactly what we were talking about with the AEM, the adaptive exposure management piece. That's really about, the pre-execution, hardening that attack surface, making your environment as, unattractive as possible and as hard to actually get into as we possibly can. During the execution, we've got some really interesting things around infiltration. We've got the lateral movement protections, privilege escalation, as well as the actual AMTD focused piece, which is stopping those threats when those really advanced in-memory attacks are coming down, and also stopping those encryption pieces. Post-execution, we never want to get there, right? I think all the things that we're doing in the pre-execution and the during execution phase are probably going to pick up on those threats. But if we do get there, we do have some ways to recover, rapidly recover through hidden restore points and then data recovery mechanisms with the encryption keys itself. So, yeah, lots of different ways to tackle the problem that we have in front of us.
Excellent. Next I have, okay, this one's about operational overhead. So,
Mm.
how would Morphisec help with dealing with reducing costs and dealing with operational overhead for specifically my security team? Doesn't say anything about what kind of team it is, but my security team and managing my overall endpoint protection. Any insights on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is it's a very small agent to deploy. So deploying the agent to your across your environment, very easy. It's 9 MB. Resource usage is, I think, less than 1%. So very minimal resource usage. But it also, when you start looking at what you can get out of it when you're operationalized after deployment, you know, helping you prioritize those vulnerabilities is going to happen a lot faster. So you don't have to spend time doing as much research on whether or not this Teams version is a vulnerability you really need to fix. You can see if versus something like a VLC media player or that Chrome, whatever it was. But also when it comes to the protection side of it, right? We preemptively prevent those problems from becoming problems in your environment. So anytime that you have to respond to an incident, that's a lot of time out of your day, a lot of time out of your team's day. And you want to minimize that as much as possible. Morphisec is not very noisy when it comes to alerting. Typically, the threats that we see and the alerts that we generate are really problems that you probably want to take a look at. And so being able to kind of make sure that's easy for you and stopping the problems before they become problems. So
Outstanding. I think we have enough time for one more.
I love it.
Um,
Great questions.
how about legacy systems or end-of-life software?
Man, knocking them out of the park today. So we're coming back to protecting legacy systems. We go all the way back to Windows 7 and 2008 R2, and from a server perspective, as well as Linux. And, a lot of these are end of life, end of service. So they're not getting updates anymore, but you can still, and they may not even be able to run the modern EDRs in a lot of cases. But you can still deploy Morphisec on these and get protections against those exploits, still get that vulnerability, the AEM information back. Again, also go back with the end of life software. Maybe it's something that an application in your environment that you'll never be able to get rid of because it's core to your business. But you still want to be able to wrap controls around it, put some security around this, right? And then also make sure you have continuity. So, we want to reduce the risk and for those unsupported systems as well. So,
All right. Well, thank you so much, Joe.
thank you.
You're a gentleman
Fun.
and a scholar. I appreciate your expertise today. Thank you, everyone, for joining. This session has been recorded and can be made available after the call.
All
So
right.
definitely reach out if you want to learn more and appreciate your time.